Welcome to the Third Row Tesla podcast. My name is Safian Farval, and today we have a very special guest. But before I introduce our special guest, I'm going to go through and introduce our crew. So our regular Third Row Tesla podcast crew. So today we have Omar Kazi, Tesla Truth.
Boom.
And we have Kristen.
Hi.
K10. Thank you. And we got Vincent Yu from Tasmanian.
Hi.
All right, great. And then we got Galileo Russell from Hyperchange.
What up, third row?
And then we got Viv, who's Falcon Heavy.
Hey.
Great. All right, Omar, do you want to introduce our guest?
Please welcome the inventor of the car fart, Elon Musk.
Thank you. Thank you. Please put that on my gravestone.
So yeah, it's kind of crazy that we're actually all here, and thank you so much for doing this.
You're welcome.
We're all Tesla customers, fans, and it's really good that it's finally happening. And I remember that I was looking at your Wikipedia tweet that it's like this bizarre fictionalized version of reality,
Yeah.
and I replied to him like, why don't you come on a podcast and like tell your fictionalized version of reality?
Sure, exactly. Until my fictionalized version.
And you replied, okay, sure. And I was kind of like taken by surprise by that. And, you know, the way you engage and listen to your customers online, it's like, I've never seen anything like that from, you know, a CEO of a public company or
Sure.
any executive. So can you tell us a little bit where that came from, why you communicate directly instead of like having this PR strategy that most companies have?
Sure. Well, I mean, it started out, I actually had one of the very first Twitter accounts, like when it was like less than 10,000 people. And then everyone was tweeting at me like what kind of latte they had at Starbucks. And I'm like, well, this seems like the silliest thing ever. So I deleted my Twitter account, and then someone else took it over and started tweeting in my name. Yeah. And then a couple of friends of mine, Will Lee and Jason Calcanis, they both said, hey, you should really use Twitter to get your message out. And also somebody's tweeting in your name and they're saying crazy things. So I was like, I'll say crazy things in my name.
Did you have to pay them?
No, I'm not sure who it was, but it was for some reason, I don't know, I got my account back.
Great.
And then I was just, I don't know, to some degree it's like just sort of, I just started tweeting for fun, really. And my early tweets were quite crazy. As I was trying to explain, like it has the arc of insanity is short in that it's not very steep because it started off insane, and so if it's still insane, it's it hasn't changed that much. Yeah, and I don't know. It seemed kind of fun to. As I think I've said this before, it's like, some people use their hair to express myself. I use Twitter.
I love that.
Why do you like Twitter so much? I mean, you could use Instagram
As
for
opposed to
example,
other
but
platforms.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, like I don't trust Facebook, obviously, and then Instagram is fine, but it's I think not exactly my style. It's hard to convey a sort of intellectual arguments on Instagram. It's hard on Twitter too, but it's but you can't it's so. Instagram is also owned by Facebook, and I was like,
Deleted.
Yeah, I just deleted it. It's like I don't really need to if I need to say something, I only really need to say it on one platform, pretty much. And so if I'm trying, and I don't want to spend too much time on social media, so it's just like, if people want to know what I'm saying, then they can just sort of go to Twitter. I'll just keep doing that as long as Twitter is good, I suppose, more good than bad. Yeah. Crypto scammers are really...
Oh, I understand.
They've been taking advantage of Vincent recently.
Yeah, I know.
A lot of
Really?
there's like 10 Vincents out there.
Right. But they totally
Yeah.
copy everything and just like change one.
Yeah,
little
they
thing.
use my avatars and then the picture, and then they just post like right below
Yeah.
your tweet. You know?
Yeah.
I was like, wow. And they blocked me too.
We fight them all the time. We're always like reporting them. Like every day we report like 10
Every day.
people.
Yeah, I have so many exactly conversations with Twitter. Like, come on, can you just I think it would take like 3 or 4 customer service people to just look at this. It's crypto scam, block it. I think it should be easy.
But then, like my wife, Vegan Shelly, I think you liked her tweet the other day. She got banned for like replying to one of your tweets and quoting like the video inside of it, and then she got suspended for like a day or something. I was like, what the heck is going on? Yeah, so it's just weird how the algorithm works.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of manipulation, but going back to the Wikipedia page, it's kind of interesting. Just
Sure.
What a decade you've had. I remember I was reading somebody's article. I think they interviewed you in 2009 or something like that, and they said, if you had met Elon Musk in 2009, right after the recession, they're like struggling with the Roadster. You never would have thought that you
Sure.
are where you are today. You're, launching astronauts into space,
We will be, hopefully,
this year, servicing the International Space Station. I mean, Tesla with the Model 3, the Model Y, electrification really, without Tesla, it would not be where it is today. You see where the other legacy automakers are, they're not doing great. So, looking at kind of like this, like you've become this legendary figure, and looking at kind of like how people kind of see you, kind of the Ashley Vance biography or Wikipedia page, what is it that really kind of sticks out to you or, makes you laugh like that's just completely off base?
Yeah. Well, I think I mentioned that I kept getting referred to as an investor in like a bunch of things. And it's like, but I actually don't invest really except in companies that I help create. So I only have the only publicly traded share that I have at all is Tesla. I have no diversity on publicly traded shares.
Like us.
Yeah, nothing. So, that's quite unusual. So, almost everyone diversifies to some degree. And then the only stock that I have of significance outside of Tesla is SpaceX, which is a private corporation, and then in order to get liquidity, which is mostly to reinvest in SpaceX and Tesla, and occasionally in provide funding for much smaller projects like Neuralink and Boring Company, then I'll actually take out loans against the Tesla and SpaceX stock. So what I actually have is whatever my Tesla and SpaceX stock is, and then there's about $1 billion of debt against that. So, which it's this is sometimes taken to imply that I'm claiming that I have no money, which I'm not claiming. But it's simply to make it clear that you'll see some number, some big number in Forbes or something. People will think I have the Tesla and SpaceX stock and I have the cash, and I'm being somehow I'm just sitting on the cash and doing nothing with it and hoarding resources. I'm like, no, it's the only alternative would be to say, okay, let's give the stock to the government or something, and then the government would be running things, and the government just is not good at running things. That's the main thing. I think there's like a fundamental sort of question of consumption versus capital allocation. This is probably gonna get me into trouble, but the paradigm of say communism versus capitalism, I think, is fundamentally sort of orthogonal to the reality of actual economics in some ways. So what you actually care about is the responsiveness of the feedback loops to the maximizing the happiness of the population. And if more resources are controlled by entities that have poor response in their feedback loops, so if it's like a monopoly corporation or a small oligopoly, or in the limit, I would say a monopolistic corporation in the limit is the government. So, this is not to say people who work at the government are bad. If those same people are taken and put in a better sort of operating system situation, the outcome will be much better. So, it's really just what is the responsiveness of the organization to maximizing the happiness of the people, and so you want to have a competitive situation where it's truly competitive, where companies aren't gaming the system, and then where the rules are set correctly, and then you need to be on the alert for regulatory capture, where the referees are in fact captured by the players, which is and the players should not control the referees, essentially, which can happen. I think like that happened, for example, with I think the zero emission vehicle mandate in California, where California was like really strict on EVs, and then the big car companies managed to sort of, frankly, in my view, trick the regulators into saying, okay, you don't need to be so hardcore about the EVs, and instead you say fuel cells of the future. But fuel cells are, of course, many years away, so forever. So they let up the rules, and then GM recalled the EV1 and crushed them in
Exactly.
a junkyard,
That's
which was
awful.
against the wishes of the owner.
Yeah,
I mean,
they all lined up to buy them, and they wouldn't let them buy them.
well, I mean, Chris Payne did this great documentary on it, and it's like the owners of the EV1, which by the way wasn't actually that great of a car, but they still wanted the electric car so bad that they held a candlelit vigil at the junkyard where their cars were crushed. Like it was like a prisoner being executed or something like that. That was literally, and like, when is the last time you even heard of that for a product? GM stops the product. I mean, what? I mean, listen, man, they're not doing that for any other GM product. Have you thought about doing the EV2? It's kind of sometimes hard to get through these guys. So anyway, I think that's a very important thing. So generally, we could see like these oligopolies forming, or duopolies, and then you get effective price fixing, and then they cut back on the R&D budget. Like kind of a silly one, frankly, is like candy. Like there's a candy oligopoly, and it's like, we don't see much innovation in candy.
So you're still working on the candy company.
Joe candy, is that?
Yeah, the boring candy.
Boring candy.
The boring candy.
It's gonna be boring candy.
I haven't seen a candy yet that's good enough to send out, but and it's but I think it's there's like 3 companies or something that control all the candy in the world pretty much, and dog food. Yeah, somebody constructed like this. It's this crazy conglomerate, and it's like dog food and baby food and candy, and it's like all
All the brands.
yeah.
Hundreds of brands.
Yeah, you think you're buying from different companies, but it all funnels up to like 3 companies or
So
something like
gross.
that.
Don't send the rendering food to the candy company.
Yeah.
Big
so-
candy.
So you want to have like a good competitive forcing function, so that you have to make the product better, or you'll lose. Like if you don't make the product better and improve the product for the end consumer, then that company should have relatively less prosperity compared to a company that makes better products. Now the car industry, is actually pretty competitive, so that's good. So then the good thing about a competitive industry is then if you make a product that's better, it's going to do better in the marketplace. So this is Gene Wilder's old house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's lovely. Thanks for having us here.
Yeah, thank you.
Really special.
Yeah, it's a cool spot. And it's got a solar glass roof.
Yeah.
Do you see that?
Yeah,
Too, right?
we didn't notice it, but
Yes.
we checked it out the second time.
Yeah,
Looks
I'm
good.
waiting for my 3, so I'm waiting for version 3. Well, whatever they're going to put on, I don't care.
Give me version 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we saw it at the store in Torrance. Actually, they've got it
Yeah.
in the stores now. Yeah. Looks really good.
Well, it's actually designed such that you don't notice it. So, he's like this. Look at this old house. This is like it's an old house. I don't know, probably 50 years old, something like that. And it's quite quirky. So if you put something on that was like didn't blend in, that it would not look right. It would be pretty strident. And this had a black comp shingle roof. So I was like, okay, let's see if we can actually have it weave in and still feel natural, look good, and And I think it's sort of achieved that goal. But yeah, this is a lovely, quirky little house. I'll show you around afterwards. It's got all sorts of weird things. It's exactly
Frank
what.
Lloyd house?
Sorry?
Is it Frank Lloyd?
No, I don't think so. I think it was just built in increments over time by probably several people. But they would have just knocked it down and built a giant house here. So it's like
So glad they didn't.
yeah, it's super cool. So Gene Wilder is one of my favorite actors actually. So he's great. Awesome movies.
So when you come up with a product like the solar glass roof, I think a lot of people misunderstand that like your goal is to bring these crazy technologies to market and really create a change in the world.
Yeah.
And so I think it's fascinating that you do it through companies, and it seems like the fastest way to create that feedback loop and to really like go from inventing something to millions of people using it right away.
Yeah.
So it seems like buying a Tesla is almost like the best thing you could do to help the climate crisis, because you're like turbocharging R&D and products and innovation. I feel like not enough people really understand that.
Yeah, that is. I think there's lots of good things people can do for the climate, but just generally anything that is moving towards sustainable energy, whether it's sustainable energy generation through solar or with an electric vehicle. Actually, just things like better insulation in a house is really effective for energy consumption. But fundamentally, oh geez, Morphin. It's ingratiating. That's Marvin the Martian. I actually got him a little, for Halloween, a little knitted Marvin the Martian cap. So he had the little, the helmet with the, it looked super cute.
You got enough, buddy?
So did you always know, like, business was the way you wanted to kind of attack these problems versus, say, maybe a non-profit or, working as a college professor or something? I don't know.
Well, when I was in high school, I thought I'd most likely be doing physics at a particle accelerator. So that's what I was, physics and computers. I mean, I got distinctions in two areas, in physics and computer science, and those were, some of my two best subjects. And then I thought, okay, well, I want to figure out what's the nature of the universe, and so go try to work with people, banging particles together, and see what happens. And then it sort of things went along, and then the superconducting super collider got canceled in the U.S. And that actually was like, whoa, what if I am working at a collider? It's been all these years, and then the government just cancels it.
Wow.
And then was like, I'm not going to do that. So it's like, so well, we roll back a little. Like I was trying to figure out what when I was a kid, I had like this existential crisis. I don't know, I was about 12 years old or something, and I was like, well, what does the world mean? What's it all about? Are we living some meaningless existence? And then I made the mistake of reading Nietzsche and Schopenhauer, and I'm like, whoa, don't do that. Not you need to be a little older, I think. No, and actually, lately, these days, I sort of reread it. So I was like, he's not that bad. He's got issues, no question about it. But it's anyway. But then I read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Douglas Adams, which is like quite a good book on philosophy, I think. And it was like, okay, we don't really know what the answer is, obviously. But the universe is the answer. And really, what are the questions we should be asking to better understand the nature of the universe? And so then to the degree that we expand the scope and scale of consciousness, then we'll better be able to ask the questions and understand why we're here or what it's all about. And so we should sort of take the set of actions that are most likely to result in us understanding what questions to ask about the nature of the universe. So therefore, we must propagate human civilization on Earth as far into the future as possible, and become a multi-planet species to, again, extend the scope and scale of consciousness and increase the probable lifespan of consciousness, which is going to be, I think, probably a lot of machine consciousness as well in the future. And that's the best we can do, basically, and yeah, that's the best we can do. So, and thinking about the various problems that we're facing, or what would most likely change the future, when they were in college, there were sort of 5 things that I thought would be, I thought these were actually, these I would not regard this as a profound insight, but rather an obvious one. The internet would fundamentally change humanity, because it's like humanity would become more of a superorganism, because the internet is like a nervous system. Now suddenly any part of the human organisms anywhere would have access to all the information.
Amazing.
Instantly. So,
Neuralink.
Hey, well, I can imagine if you didn't have a nervous system, you wouldn't know what's going on. Your fingers wouldn't know what's going on. Or your toes wouldn't know what's going on. You'd have to do it by diffusion. And the way information used to work was really by diffusion. One human would have to call another human, or write them. Yes, like if it was a letter, you would have to write a letter. You'd have to hand that letter to another human. That would be carried through a bunch of things. Find another person would give it to you. Extremely slow diffusion. And if you wanted access to books, if you did not have a library, you don't have it. That's it. Right. So now you have access to all the books instantly, and if you can be in a remote, like, mountaintop jungle location or something, and have access to all of humanity's information if you've got a link to the internet. This is a fundamental, profound change. So that's one thing. I was on the internet early because of the physics community. That was pretty normal, although his interface was almost entirely text and hard to use. But then another one would be obviously making life multiplanetary, making consciousness multiplanetary, changing human genetics, which obviously I'm not doing, by the way. There's a thorny subject, but it is being done with CRISPR and others. It will become normal to I think, to change the human genome.
Like, what's the opportunity? Like, why is that something that's inevitable? Or,
well, I think for sure, as far as say getting rid of diseases or propensity to various diseases, then that's gonna be like the first thing that you'd want to edit out. So it's like if you've got like a situation where you're definitely going to die of some kind of cancer at age 55, you prefer to have that edited out.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think just edit that out. There's the Gattaca sort of extreme thing where it's not merely edited out, but it's like it's edited in for various enhancements and that kind of thing, which probably will come too. But I'm not saying arguing for or against it. I'm just saying this. They're more likely to come than not down the road. Yeah. So then AI, really major one.
So these are all big motivational factors to keep our consciousness going.
Oh, and it's sustainable. Yes. Sustainable energy. So sustainable energy actually was something that I thought was important before the environmental implications became as obvious as they are. It's simply because if you mine and burn hydrocarbons, then you're going to run out of them. Because it's not like mining sort of say metals, for example. If you we recycle steel and aluminum, and because that's just it's not a change of energy state. Whereas if you take fossil fuels, you're taking some from a high energy state, converting it to a lower energy state like CO2, which is extremely stable. So whereas we will never run out of metals, not a problem. We will run out of mined hydrocarbons, and then necessarily if we've got billions, ultimately trillions of tons of hydrocarbons that were buried deep underground in solid, liquid, or gas form, whatever, but they're deep underground. You sort of move them from deep underground to the oceans and atmosphere. You will have a change in the chemistry of the surface, obviously, and then there's just a certain probability associated with, well, how bad will that be? And the range of possibilities goes from mildly bad to extremely bad. But then why would you run that experiment? That seems like the craziest experiment ever, especially since we have to go to sustainable energy anyway. Why would you run that experiment? It's just the maddest thing I've ever heard. I'm not saying there shouldn't be some use of hydrocarbons on Earth, but there just should be the correct price placed on CO2 production. And the obvious thing to do is have a carbon tax. It's a no-brainer. I don't know, 90+% of economists would say this, and I think of physicists, and it's just the market system works well if you've got the right price on things. It's very, very simple. And if you've got a price of zero, effectively, or very low, then it's, people will behave accordingly. So it's just, that's the thing that needs to get done. I think it will get done. And then if over time, as you raise the price on carbon, you can actually, I think, encourage sequestration technologies over time. And there'll be a lot of innovation in that regard. And that's the right way to do it. Yeah.
So you had these realizations about, areas of big value, and you went and started Zip2. You sold it, got 20 million cash. You were the largest shareholder of PayPal at the time eBay acquired it. I think you got 160 million or something like that. You have enough money basically for an entire lifetime. Why go and put your money into SpaceX, which is a huge, risky operation, or Tesla? Why not just kind of, relax?
Sure. Basically, I graduated from Penn with basically physics and economics, and then we actually did a road trip to Stanford with Robin Wren, who was in my physics class, and now works at Tesla actually. And he grew up in Shanghai, so. He's a very smart guy. He ended up continuing at Stanford, and I ended up going on deferment a couple days into the semester. But I was going to be studying material science and the physics of high energy density capacitors for use in electric vehicles. So the intent was, I was going to go, okay, I'm going to work on energy storage solutions for electric vehicles. And I'd worked at a company called Pinnacle Research for a couple summers that did high energy density capacitors. I was going to try to do effectively like a solid state version of what they were doing with it's going to get very complicated from a technical standpoint, but they were using a ruthenium tantalum oxide. Ruthenium is extremely rare and expensive. You cannot scale that. So it's like, can you find a substitute for ruthenium? But we were able to get to energy density is comparable to a lead-acid battery, but with incredibly high power density. So,
what do you want?
I can go down a deep rabbit hole there, but
what's the purpose of a supercapacitor in an EV?
Capacitor.
No, I think with the advent of high-energy lithium-ion batteries, a capacitor is not the right path.
What was your thinking back then, though, that made you think it could be useful for EVs?
I want to use advanced chip-making equipment to make capacitors that were precise at a molecular level. So at the, just a level of precision that was sort of unheard of in capacitors. Like capacitors, energy is a function of its area and a separation distance. So if you can have very tiny separation distance, and you can inhibit quantum tunneling, like I said, how do you, things get pretty esoteric. So you're going to inhibit quantum tunneling, get a very short gap, and then you could, in theory, get to very high energy densities by making capacitors in the way that you would make an x86 processor. And since there were tens of millions of dollars going into chip making R&D, that I thought there might be a way to make an advanced capacitor using chip making equipment instead of the conventional means.
So is it off the table, ultracapacitor?
It's unnecessary.
Okay.
Interesting.
It's unnecessary. I think it probably is physically possible, but it's unnecessary at this point.
I mean, I know a lot of people were talking about Maxwell, and they had been working on some stuff with capacitors.
The funny thing is that when I was doing my internships at this advanced capacitor company called Pinnacle Research, which was in Las Gatas, we talked a lot about Maxwell, and Maxwell was also trying to make high energy density capacitors. Now Tesla acquired Maxwell.
Full circle. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Looking forward to that investor day.
Yeah.
it's kind of a big deal.
That's great. Great to know.
Maxwell has a bunch of technologies that are that where if they're applied in the right way, I think can have a very big impact.
Like the dry electrode stuff?
That would be one of them. Yes, that's a big deal.
Yeah, for sure.
Much bigger deal than it may seem. Yeah. And there's a few other things, but yeah.
With the space that it takes up for the ovens, that for the current technology, you can save all that real estate space now. That's one aspect, and the cost reduction, the weight savings. I mean, there's so many pluses, right?
Yes, I mean there's many things there, but I'll have to wait until whatever battery day, which is hopefully in a few months. But I think we've got some pretty exciting things to share. So. Yeah,
Gally's very excited.
Yeah, it seems like the
about it a
pace
lot
of
in
the
his
innovation of the battery thing has just taken off. Like since you guys have more capital and being able to like have the Gigafactory be vertically integrated, just seems like no other car company is making that many batteries. So they're not even thinking about what comes next. But that
They're
huge
not
bet,
Man,
Not even come close.
Taycan 201 miles.
not even.
That's a joke.
Yeah, no, it's true. The other car companies just really want to outsource battery technology. Not even making this battery module and cell, but they're obviously outsourcing the cells, but even outsourcing the modules and the packs. And it's like they're really not thinking about fundamental chemistry improvements, and so I should say a bit about like electric vehicles or sustainable energy in general. I said it was pretty, I think, obvious to. Not just to me, but to a lot of people, even go back 30 years or longer, that we must have a sustainable energy solution. In fact, it's tautological. If it's not sustainable, we must at some point find an alternative to it. And so, even if there were no environmental impact to the sort of a fossil fuel economy, then we would run out of them, and then we'd have economic collapse, and civilization would fall apart. So that was actually my initial motivation for electric vehicles. It's like, okay, we've got to have a solution that does not require mining hydrocarbons, that is sustainable in the long term. It was not actually initially from an environmental standpoint, because I had not realized the gravity of the environmental situation at that time. And I thought actually for sure by now we'd have electric cars.
Are we back on the moon?
Yeah, totally. Why are we not back on the moon? It's insane. If you said told somebody in '69 that we're not be back on the moon and in like 2020, they'd be like, you might have gotten punched, honestly, because they'd be like, you're just it's like so insultingly rude to the future of humanity. Because they'd be like, what is wrong with you?
It's encouraging. SpaceX is encouraging, though.
Yeah. So it's like we should have a base on the moon. We should have sent people to Mars. None of that's occurred. We've got to make that happen. Yeah. So but on the sustainability front, it was really, like I said, initially not so much from an environmental standpoint, but from a necessity of replacing a finite resource in order to ensure that civilization could continue to grow. And then the urgency of it became much more obvious, like, wow, we really better do something, because the environmental stuff is becoming quite serious, and the inertia of large existing companies is just hard to appreciate. They just want to keep doing the same thing, and maybe 5% different every year, maybe 5% different. Big companies hate change, so then the time that Tesla, was created, there was no one was doing electric cars. No, there weren't really startups. The big car companies weren't doing it. GM and Toyota canceled their EV programs.
Now everybody's doing it right now. Like
And their mom.
Everybody's talking about it.
You're putting that fire under them.
Right?
Apparently the mom is doing it.
yeah, and we would all like to congratulate about the Gigafactory 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I would like to know like why China is the best country to build the first foreign Gigafactory.
China is the biggest consumer of cars in the world. So it's the biggest, so that alone would be enough to do it. I think also there was a lot of uncertainty about tariffs, and it's like we potentially would be unable to sell effectively in China if we did not have a factory locally, or at least unable to sell at prices that weren't extremely high. Those are really the two main reasons. I think that, but I think there's also a third important reason that there's just so much talent and drive in China that I think it's a good place to do a lot of things, and the evidence is there in the incredible progress in the factory, which was built with very, very high quality in a very short period of time, and the cars coming out of Shanghai are already very high quality.
I can tell, and
Yeah.
the run
They
rate
look
is
great, yeah.
amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that they use the Chinese badge as well. It's like a symbol of pride and
Sure.
made in China.
Yeah, it's cool. It's super cool.
How did Tesla manage to get the first wholly owned foreign car company in China? I mean, a factory.
I've went to China many times, and they kept saying that we would have to do this, majority local owned venture, and I said that and we had to partner with someone. I said, we're a little late to the dance here, so who would we partner with? There's nobody left, and also we're just a little company, so we're they kept saying we should get married, and we're a bit young.
That's a good example.
But young, and then but and then also as pointing out, there's certainly Chinese companies that are going to, that are establishing factories in the U.S. I mean, there's like Faraday Future and that kind of thing, and that's 100% owned by them. And so, to be fair, it should be allowed that an American car company should be able to own its factory in China as well. And so we, talked to them for over a number of years, and they eventually said, okay, well, we'll change the law. So they changed the law. But no, other companies can do it as well. So it's not just limited to Tesla.
And how much of that production hell, learnings, have really enabled? Because I don't want to bring up CapEx, but one of my favorite things is the stats in the shareholder letter. It's so much cheaper, not only faster, but it seems like you guys have learned so much from the Fremont factory, and that really enabled kind of a turbocharged build for Shanghai.
Yeah, I think the big difference is we are way less dumb than we were. So the foolishness of capital expenditures was very high, and it's less high now. And then with the Shanghai factory, we designed out all of or as much of the foolishness as we could think of that exists at Fremont and in Nevada. So we just made a lot of decisions that weren't smart, and we designed those out such the production line is much simpler. So it's much simpler and better implemented. And then we also found that in most cases the suppliers were more efficient in China as well than in the U.S. So but we've also managed to get a lot more output from existing equipment in the U.S. as well. So the Model 3 body line in Fremont, for example, was only ever meant to do 5,000 cars, Model 3s a week, and it's doing 7,000.
Nice.
So and with turning off a bunch of unnecessary things that were being done. So I mean, there was a lot of bullish things that we were doing. So and we changed some of the designs and made it easier to. It's like hundreds of little things to make it easier to build, and so being able to get 40% more output off the same line obviously makes a big difference, and while reducing the cost, the marginal cost of production, and I think improving the quality of the car. So it's all good stuff. It was the result of a ton of hard work by a lot of people. So yeah, but it was kind of necessary in that we didn't really have a place to put a second Model 3 body line. So it's like we either make this one go faster or we will not be able to achieve production. But the Model 3 body line in Shanghai is much simpler than the one in, and I say that in a good way, because it has the same end result. So if you know, but it's a much easier to understand. There's just getting rid of unnecessary movement. There's a lot of unnecessary movement in the Fremont body line, but not in Shanghai.
So we were talking about a lot of Tesla stuff, but we kind of wanted to ask you about your personal history, because we were saying you were saying how there's some misconceptions you would like to make straight. And you know, Ashley Vance wrote a book about you. I just read May's lovely book, and it was really wonderful. I loved it and learned a little bit more history about your family and you. But what are some of the misconceptions that you would like to correct?
You know, most of this is just ended up being kind of water under the bridge that people didn't notice that much. Yeah, I mean, there's this sort of some stories in there where it sounds like I fired people all of a sudden and arbitrarily, which was not the case. You know, it just actually asked somebody who didn't know what was going on, and then that person was suddenly not there, and they didn't know why. Yeah. But I definitely do not fire talented people, and you know, unless there's no option. So, and so not without warning. Or
I keep hearing you say "we." Like, it sounds like you're always thinking of everybody. I see you as a very selfless person.
Thanks.
I mean, seriously. I mean, yeah. It's like from the age of 12, it sounds like you've been thinking about how to help humanity.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to be sort of like some, you know, the sort of savior or something like that, you know. But it's really just that if it just seems like I don't know, seems like the obvious thing to do. I can't, like, I'm not sure why you do anything else. You know, we want to maximize happiness of the population and propagate into the future as far as possible and understand the nature of reality. And from that, I think everything else follows.
I saw you on Twitter, like talking about how, like, people are having this rumor that you've been wealthy your whole life, and that would be like the only reason you became successful. And you've debunked that. And can you like share more about your upbringing and what led you to going to North America?
Sure. I was in South Africa, and it seemed like wherever there was, like, a lot of the advanced technology in the world was being produced in America, and Silicon Valley especially. So I wanted to be where I could sort of have an impact on technology. So that's or be involved in the creation of new technology. So that's what prompted me to go to at first Canada, because I could get citizenship in Canada through my mom, and then ultimately to the US. But yeah, I just left South Africa when I was 17 and landed in Montreal. I had like, I don't know, about $2,000 Canadian. Yeah, and I started staying in a youth hostel for a few days, and then there was this, you could buy a ticket to go across the country for $100 and stop along the way. And so I bought that, and just took a Greyhound across Canada, and saw all these like little towns. Well, we were getting. I didn't have much. I had like a backpack and a suitcase of books, but the bus company Greyhound, they unloaded it in one of the cities, and then the bus left without my stuff.
Oh, that's nice.
So I literally had nothing.
All your books.
But your clothes too?
Actually, weirdly, I think I might have had the books thing, but not my clothes.
That was priorities.
Yeah, because I was just sitting in the bus station reading, waiting for the bus to get ready.
Yeah.
And I think I had the books, but no clothing. So, anyway, but I managed to get to Swift Current, Saskatchewan, and then it's your cousin's son, yeah, has a wheat farm there, and I worked on the wheat farm for about 6 weeks.
Wow.
So I turned 18 in Saskatchewan. It's in this town called Swift Current.
So that was summertime, right? It was June.
Yeah, June 28th.
So, because I've been there in the winter and it's like minus 40.
Yeah.
You don't want to be traveling there.
Yeah.
Did you ice skate? Did you try ice skating?
No, it was quite warm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, well, I mean, in the winter. Did you stay for the
Were
winter?
you there in the winter?
No, I was just there. I was there for about 6 weeks.
Oh, you're lucky you survived. That's good.
Yeah, so I was
It's
just
cold there.
literally working on the wheat farm. Did a barn raising, and I cleared out the wheat bins, the grain silos, and that kind of thing. And I just worked the vegetable patch, basically just doing various things.
Was your mind just thinking of what you're going to do after that?
Yeah, I was trying to figure what I do next. Don't know what to do. So then I ended up getting back on the bus and went to Vancouver, and I had a half uncle there who was kind of in the lumber industry. He made lumber equipment.
Sounds like the Northwest.
Yeah, basically. So I ended up chainsawing logs and working on this lumber mill, and cleaning out the where they boil the pulp in these crazy sort of boiler rooms. And that might be the hardest job I've had, actually, because you have to crawl through this little tunnel in a hazmat suit, and then with a shovel and then shovel this sort of steaming sand and mulch out of the boilers to clean them out. And you have to there was only one entrance or exit, which is this little tunnel. If you're claustrophobic, it would be real bad. And then you shovel the sand and the mulch through the tunnel, and it would actually block the tunnel, and then somebody else would reach in and shovel it out from the other side. So it's just long enough that if you have a shovel with a long handle, so one person on the inside can shovel it far enough that someone on the outside can shovel it out. And then you have to rotate every 15 minutes to avoid getting hypothermia.
And there's no safeties, there's just a man looking out for you.
There's just two people kind of paired up, so if one person collapses and you go to call somebody, but it'd be really hard to drag somebody out. I have to say that it does not seem safe, because if the tunnel gets blocked, trying to unblock that tunnel would be very difficult in a short period of time. So, but it was the highest paying job at the employment office. So I was like, okay, the other jobs were $8 an hour, and this one was $18 an hour.
You had to buy your clothes, and they're all gone.
Well, they did give you a hazmat suit, so yeah.
How long did you do that job for?
4 days.
Oh, okay.
No, but it was done. Yeah. You said it was a short-term thing, cleaning grain bins, cleaning the boiler rooms.
So what was next? We were in boiler rooms, and then.
Yeah, so it's basically, I mean, literally it was like a lumberjack who's chainsawing logs, and just doing lumber stuff, basically, for a few months there. And then applied for college, and I went to Queen's University in Kingston, and was there for a couple of years, and then somebody suggested I should apply to UPenn, and I didn't think I'd be able to go, because I was paying for my own way through university, just which is actually not that hard in Canada because the tuition
System.
yeah, the tuition's highly subsidized in Canada. So, so with, with basically some, if you just sort of work during the summer and semester and take out some loans and get some scholarships, you can pretty much go to any college in Canada, I think. But I met someone who was at UPenn and they said you should at least apply, and I applied, and they actually gave me like quite a big scholarship. So that allowed me to go there. And so then I did the physics and economics there, and then that's what led to the road trip to Stanford with Robin Wren, and then that was during that summer that I was like, okay, I can either spend several years kind of doing a PhD, and not that I care about the PhD actually, but I just needed a lab. But I could either spend a bunch of years working in a lab, and maybe the technology would pan out, or maybe it wouldn't. But the internet was definitely about to go supernova in '95. So I was like, okay, look, I can always come back to working on electric cars, basically, and which obviously I did. But the internet is not going to wait. So then I put Stanford on deferment and started Zip2, which was really just, we started off with maps and directions, yellow pages, white pages, that kind of thing. And it was, best of my knowledge, the first maps and directions on the internet. So and there's still some like patents I have. I don't have many more, but I think they've obviously lapsed at this point. But for maps and directions and yellow pages and advertising and stuff. And I wrote the whole initial code base. I wrote personally because there wasn't anybody else. It was just me. So, and I only had a few $1,000s, and then my brother joined, and he brought like $5,000, which was a lot. Yeah, at least for the first few months, there was literally only one computer. So the website, when the website wasn't working, it was because I was compiling code. and even to get an internet connection was pretty hard. But there was an internet service provider on the floor below us. We more or less squatted in this office. The landlord was like out of the country or something, and nobody was using it. So
you lived in there?
Yeah.
I think I read that in Maye's book you showered at the YMCA then.
That's right. Yeah.
That's smart though. I mean, you were thrifty. You did what you had to do.
We just like had no money, so what are we gonna do?
What did people think about Zip2 generally? Was it like seen as a crazy idea, or like did people even understand the internet back then?
Most people did not understand the internet. Most people didn't know. Even on Sand Hill Road, like we tried pitching people to invest in an internet company. Most of the VCs we pitched to had never used the internet.
Do you remember some of the VC firms you went to on Sand Hill?
I remember most of the time we wouldn't take a meeting, and if they did take the meeting, they were pretty bored and not said like who's made money on the internet? No one. We're like, no one. Okay. But the sea change occurred when Netscape went public.
Yeah.
So, but the first thing I tried to do was not start a company. I tried to get a job at Netscape, but they didn't reply to me.
Oh.
So I tried hanging out in the lobby at Netscape. I don't know who to talk to. I was really too shy to talk to anyone. I don't know. So it's like, okay, I can't get a job at the only internet company that that does internet software. So then I'll try writing software. So that's kind of what happened there. Yeah, and then like I said, my brother came down and joined. This is like late '95. And then in January '95, I think it was there was a lot more interest in the internet stuff following the Netscape IPO, and the software was more impressive, I guess. So then more David Dow invested. So they're VC firm on Sand Hill Road. and they invested, I think it was like $3 million for effectively 60% of the company.
Wow.
Which we thought was crazy. They're like, well, they're going to give us the money for nothing? Well, they must be mad. Yeah, so this seemed like crazy that they would give so much money for a company that consisted at the time of about 5 people. Like literally, I think 5 people at the time. So, but anyway, it worked out well for them in the end. So we hired a lot more people. We built out the service, and then we also ended up writing a bunch of software to bring the newspapers online. So Knight Ridder, New York Times Company, Hearst, all became investors and customers. And at one point, Zip2 was responsible for a significant section of the New York Times Company website. Yeah, so I got to know the media industry pretty well, and but over what really happened with Zip2 is it effectively got too much. There was too much control by the existing media companies, so they had too many board seats and too much voting control, and that they kept trying to push the company down directions that made no sense. So Zip2 actually had really good software. I'd say software that's comparable, in some ways more advanced than, say, a Yahoo or Excite at the time, but it was just not being used properly, and it was all being forced through media companies who would then not use it. So it's like, it's okay, we've got the best technology, but it's not being deployed properly. So, but fortunately, Compaq came along, and they Compaq had acquired Digital Equipment, and Digital Equipment had owned AltaVista, which at the time was probably the best search engine. So they thought their idea was they will combine AltaVista with a bunch of other internet companies and try to create a competitor to Yahoo or Excite. That was Excite used to be a big thing, amazingly, and Yahoo used to be a big thing.
Yeah.
Now it's like owned by Verizon or something.
Yeah.
There was AOL.
AOL, yeah, back then.
Yahoo's a crazy story. They failed to acquire Google twice. Microsoft offered them like $40 billion or something, and they turned it down.
And then Alibaba saved them out of nowhere.
Yeah.
The Alibaba stake was worth more than the whole company at one point.
By a huge amount. Right. It was basically a proxy for Alibaba shares trading.
Yeah, no, exactly. But at one point, at that time, like if you go back to, say, 98, 99, Yahoo seemed like an unstoppable juggernaut. Yeah. Like literally, this company will, is a behemoth. Nobody could possibly defeat them. But anyway, and where's Compaq today? Yeah, so. But that was their idea, which is, at least if executed well, could have made sense.
Kimbal!
Really? Serious? Woo!
Yeah, what are you guys doing?
We're recording a podcast.
Very cool.
Yeah, how do you want me to join?
Yeah, pull up a chair.
That's awesome.
So what do you remember about Zip2?
Yeah, we remember.
Yeah. So, but then the internet came along, became this huge thing. I mean, it was always there, but it became a big deal. And then Elon was working in Silicon Valley, and as I remember it, Elon overheard a meeting where some of the Yellow Pages companies were thinking of doing sort of online Yellow Pages. And
No, why would I have been in a meeting like that?
This is a long time ago. Anyway, you called me up and you said you think you can do a better job, so we think we can do a better
Maybe
job.
Maybe you made that up to try and get Kimbal interested.
How would I be in a meeting with Yellow Pages company?
I have no idea. That's what I remember. But what's your version of that?
I didn't even know any Yellow Pages.
I agree with you. I agree with you now. but so it was like I think April of 1995. We started working on it, and the I guess the idea was fairly simple: to take mapping and apply it to the internet. And there were a few other companies trying to do it, but no one with the very cool technology of sort of what was called vector-based mapping, which is what we all use today, where the map is actually alive, not just a picture.
That was very ahead of its time.
I think we were the first. I know there were other people putting maps on the internet, but I think we were the first to put vector-based mapping, which is what the kind of technology you use today on the internet, and door-to-door directions. So it was cool. I remember my brother and I pressing go on his server at our office, and it took about 60 seconds for the first door-to-door directions to come up on the screen. And even 60 seconds was amazing. We were like, this is incredible. Door-to-door directions to anywhere. This is just amazing. And
It seemed amazing at the time.
definitely seemed amazing at the time. Now it's like so absolutely normal, but this was like an impossible thing. It was so cool. And using Java, Elon had coded a interactive map, which again, all super normal stuff today, but the ability to just draw a square and zoom in or zoom out, that was just unheard of technology.
Draw a square.
Yeah, you remember that? It was like a little red square on the Java.
On a browser, it was weird. That was unusual.
Yeah.
Yes, you just
Well, you cheated if you're using Java applets.
Yeah, but this is when Java sucked and it was barely.
Yeah, this was like probably the most.
It's 95.
I think we even got some sort of recognition because it was the most advanced Java application on Java at the time, because it was so ridiculously hard. It was a really crappy technology at the time, but this was done on it.
The thing is, that if you downloaded the Java applet, we could transmit the vector data, not just a bitmap, and this is when everyone was on a modem. Right. So if somebody's on 28 kilobits modem, or trying to download a map image would take forever. Whereas if you had downloading the vector data so that locally rendered using the Java applet was relatively speaking super fast. Yeah. That's what made it cool.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, even vector maps even Google Maps was using raster maps a few years ago. It seems like very ahead of its time.
Well, we were the first. I believe the two of us were the first humans to see maps and door-to-door directions on the internet, which I think is pretty cool. Yeah.
How Garmin came out? When did Garmin first launch?
Well, they weren't internet-based, right? So you could. Actually, I don't think Garmin was even a player at this point. It was Navtech was the only place that we were. That's where we got the data from. Yeah. And they were building it for Hertz Neverlost, which came out a few years later. You know those things that no one uses in the GPS systems. Really, really bad technology, but the actual mapping data was amazing. And so we took that and applied it to the internet. We were 22 and 23 at the time. It had cost them $300 million to build this data, and they gave it to us for free with a simple contract saying, if you ever make any money on this, you got to come talk to us. And that's how we got it.
Wow. That's amazing.
It was amazing.
Yeah, so it's amazing what happens if you ask nicely. And there's also part of it was these guys had been working so hard on the tech, and no one had ever seen what they were doing, because it was not on the internet and it was not being used for Hertz, and so it was just they were excited that someone would use the data and people could see what they'd been working on.
So how did you guys get the engineering chops to pull this off? Because it sounds like you were so young, you didn't really have any help, and then you built this cutting edge piece of technology.
I mean, Elon's been coding from I don't know what age, but you published your first
Blastar game, right?
Yeah, when he was 12.
Did you write any other cool stuff back then?
I wrote a bunch of games.
Yeah.
And then occasionally software for people that ask for software.
You also work for a video game company.
Yeah, finally it was called
Rocket Science.
Yeah.
That's funny.
By the way, we took a SpaceX tour yesterday. It was insane.
Thank you for that. That was amazing. Yeah, it was so good.
It's like Batman's lair in there.
That's right.
It's really cool.
Really is amazing.
But it gives you perspective on what Tesla's doing, because the technology is so advanced, and there's interchange of information there. I know they used the Inconel fuse, right? Was from SpaceX when they couldn't get the the power output, right? It kept burning up the fuse in the performance models. So yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to see the SpaceX tech being applied to Tesla. I think there's one joint employee between SpaceX and Tesla, and it's the materials. Is it the materials engineer?
What about Elon?
Of course, Elon. Of course. In addition to Elon, because there's just not that many humans on the planet that know how to do this stuff.
For sure. Well, it sounded like back in the old days, was it just Elon doing the coding, or?
I mean, I did a little for like HTML front end coding, but it wasn't mine.
Not recently. But no, we had no money, so we couldn't employ him for anyone. So I just wrote all the software.
And you worked through the night, right? You just never.
Yeah,
according to May's
just
book, you
work.
just never slept. I don't know.
I mean, we lived in a little office. I think this address was 470 Sherman Way in Palo Alto. It was probably
about the size of this room here.
Wow.
Yeah, it was probably like 15 feet wide by 30 feet long with a little closet in the back. And we would we couldn't afford a place to sleep, or like a house, a home or apartment. So we would sleep in it, and it had a couch that was a futon, and so we'd pull out the futon, take turns sleeping on the futon or the floor. Although he coded a lot at night, so I usually got the futon at night. And we had to code it at night because the server, when the internet was live, needed to be functional. And we just had data for the Bay Area at the time, so we were just kind of making sure that the people in the Bay Area could use it. And then I had a little mini fridge with a cooking stove on it, and we'd cook simple things, like pasta sauce and pasta and things like that. That would be as cheap as dirt. People think it's expensive to eat real food. It's actually really cheap. Yeah, you cook vegetables, pasta, and beans, super cheap. Yeah, it was absolutely the cheapest. And then we would go eat at Jack in the Box, which I still kind of shiver a little. And I haven't eaten there for probably 20 years or longer, maybe 22 years, and I can still probably recite the entire menu.
Yeah, we cycled through the menu at Jack in the Box because it was like just a few blocks away from.
And it was open 24 hours.
Open 24 hours. Trying to get dinner in Palo Alto after 10 is very difficult.
Zero.
Yeah.
So did they know you very well at Jack in the Box?
Well, they didn't really.
No.
No. And I remember one time I got a milkshake, and I was so tired. It was like 4 in the morning, and just needed to get some sugar for the rest of the night. And there was something in it. And I remember just flicking it out and just pretending it didn't exist and just kept drinking my milkshake. It was like that. We were that kind of like not in the zone to go back into Jack in the Box and argue about a milkshake, but I don't want to not drink the milkshake.
And part of the reason that food was like so cheap is that they had some people I think died of food poisoning.
Yes. Yes, it was right around that time when they got into a food poisoning scare. So it was so bad.
It was just very cheap to eat there. And I figured they probably have taken some action because after the food poisoning. So hopefully there's just like eat a little bit of it. It just tastes funny. Stop eating if it tastes funny.
You run out of things to eat because after like the 17th chicken fajita pita, you're like,
Chicken fajita pita.
Can't do it.
The
And then you have to
teriyaki
eat
bowl.
something.
Yeah, remember that teriyaki bowl?
Was that one good?
It's actually it varied, but it was edible. It was not
Yeah.
bad.
Which one was it?
The teriyaki bowl.
Teriyaki bowl wasn't bad. There was the sort of sourdough grilled cheese thing that wasn't bad.
Yeah, I honestly didn't mind it.
So those were the good old days, right?
I mean, it was honestly good days. I mean, we were just hoping that people would let us stay in the country.
Yeah.
We weren't really that worried about what we were eating. We were just doing everything we could to get someone to support the company. We didn't really I didn't understand the venture capital world that much, so we were doing a seed round, an angel round, and doing our best to talk to everyone and anyone we could find. We had a very good friend with us, Greg Curry, who's now passed away, who was older than us by about 10 years, I think. And was a wonderful mentor, helped us out, and put a little money in as well. And then I did a lot of the work to just network with people. I think our first salesman who was selling Yellow Pages ads for us was a real estate agent who knew another person who knew this other person who helped us raise or put together. We ended up not doing the round, but put together a round of like $200,000 or something.
Yeah.
And then
We did like part of it or something. I don't know.
But I think once we had the Java map, which was really quite impressive. I mean, if you've never seen Google Maps or Yahoo Maps before, it really is a remarkable thing to see. We started to go to we got some audiences with some venture capitalists, and it just went from we were starving, we had no car, well, the car we had broken.
The wheel fell off.
Huh?
The wheel fell off.
Yeah,
The wheel fell off. Yeah.
What kind of car was it?
I remember that.
It was an old BMW 3 Series
Was it the one you
where
worked
we did
on?
a road trip
Yeah.
across the country.
Yeah, the one that my mom has some pictures of.
I think there's still there's a carve in the road at Page Mill and El Camino where
Literally, the wheel
road
came off.
wheel fell off and the guy, poor
Literally
kid
in the
driving
intersection.
it, just drove it without the wheel to the side. And so there's this arc
It's
of a
pretty much time
line
for the
in Page
junkyard at
Mill
that
Road
point.
that has
Because
never been repaired.
The whole car is falling apart. So, yeah, it's like the point at which the wheel falls off. It's time to go to the junkyard. Yeah.
But Kimbal, the night before you met the venture capitalists, you and I were at Kinko's till 2 in the morning.
No, that was way more stressful. That was way later because we already had the deal, but we were not. I don't know if you were, but I was not legally in America, so I was illegally there.
I mean, I was legally there, but I was meant to be doing student work.
Oh yeah, right.
I had a student work visa.
Yeah, you were doing you were supposed to be doing a PhD in Stanford and decided not to.
So it was like I was allowed to do work, sort of supporting whatever, you know.
Exactly. Whereas I actually I try to get a visa, but there's just no visa you can get to do a startup.
Yeah, unfortunately nobody was paying you anything.
Might have changed, but back then for sure no. And so we ended up getting we got a deal from Moore David out and this really well respected VC firm, and we had to break the news to them that we took the bus to get to the offices. We don't have a car and we don't have an apartment and we're illegal.
No, you were illegal.
I was legal. And so
But I was legal, but my visa was going to run out in 2 years.
okay. Yeah, but I was definitely we needed to get it
student.
sorted, and so they were great. I mean, the lead investor, his wife was from Canada. They knew the whole challenge of being an immigrant, and we had Canadian passports, and so they funded the company and they gave us some money to each buy a car, and they gave us a salary so we could rent an apartment, and I got a visa through the company. But the morning we were supposed to present to the partners, I went to Toronto because my mother was freaking out because she needed her computer fixed. And I was
Really?
Seriously, this is brutal. So I flew out there, planning to fly back on Sunday, and the meeting was on Monday. And I get to the airport on Sunday, and the border control they call me out. They're like, you're going down to work. You're not going down for travel. And I was like, no, I'm going down to work. I explained. Actually, no, I didn't. I said I'm not going to work because I think that's what I was supposed to say. But the lawyers told me not to say anything, and so they rejected me from the border. Oh no! And so I'm supposed to do the presentation with Elon the next morning, and so a friend of mine came to pick me up at the airport and drove me across the border, and we went to the Buffalo border and just said we're going to go see the David Letterman show.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And the border control guy was like, "Yeah, go ahead."
Wow. That's amazing.
I got on the late night flight from Buffalo to San Francisco, and we made the meeting in the morning. So
Yeah, I mean, technically you were not going down to work because that would have meant you were being paid something.
Then I would need. I wasn't actually paid anything. Yeah. Technically, we weren't actually. No, you're right.
You're not actually breaking the law.
We were not breaking the law because we were not being paid anything. Exactly.
But yeah, it's like there was So.
I should have told them that at the border control.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was very
By work, do
frustrating.
you mean getting paid for something? No, I'm not doing that.
No, yeah, you're right. Exactly. We were not being paid. Exactly. But yeah, so then they approved the deal that Monday, and we started building Zip 2. And it wasn't a business model for back in those days.
Well, it was kind of like Yelp is like business model was similar to sort of Yelp, but it was at a time when most businesses didn't know what the internet was, and most people didn't have an email address or
we had to
online,
explain to them what a website was. The internet was kind of this cool thing. People were using Netscape browser, and I think by the end of it, we got 18,000 businesses to be on our service, paying to be like with websites and everything.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the things that you can do today, like automatically build websites, we built a lot of those sort of tools to make it easier to build websites, and we had to sell door to door because that was the only way.
Wow. Did you hire people, or is it just you guys going door to door?
No, we had a team by that time because we could hire a team. But I remember talking to a Yellow Pages guy once, and it was amazing. It was the head of the Toronto Star that they owned all the Yellow Pages.
Yellow Pages will never die. Famous last
He
words.
literally, because we went and talked to him to partner. We said we want to partner with you, and let's be one of your partners to put the Yellow Pages online. And he picked up the Yellow Pages, this book, this big thick book that's full of ads, this multi-billion-dollar revenue stream.
I mean, these guys were so arrogant and
So arrogant.
like, we are the kings of the world and
Seriously.
it will never end.
He picked up this book and he threw it at me. And he said, "Do you ever think you're going to replace this?"
Seriously.
And I was just literally like, I mean, my head is like, dude, you're already dead.
Yeah.
Reminds me of the anti-Tesla people, you know. Gas cars will never die.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, we saw the growth of the internet. We saw the use of the Yellow Pages. We saw even all our competitors and stuff. And no one was using the paper Yellow Pages if you had the choice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
No one.
Yes, that's very true.
And so at that point, very few people were on the internet. So it was really a question of really, is the internet going to succeed? Which we were huge believers in, and these guys were not. You know, they didn't even clue in.
Yeah, but it was like one foreign country after another. We would say like, listen, we'll just put your Yellow Pages online. It's going to cost very little. You know, you'll still own all the content and everything. And they're like, they'll just throw us out of the office.
Yeah.
You know, like, no. And how dare you even suggest this?
It was extraordinary, and it's been interesting. To
We're
watch
like,
over the
okay, I
years.
guess we'll just build it. And,
Yeah.
and then
But it's been interesting to watch over the years where, like in PayPal, the competitors were not banks. You know, even though that should have been the competitor.
No, there were banks that tried to compete.
But wasn't it eBay mostly that was sort of the bank?
Well, eBay had something called Bull Point.
Yeah.
But it wasn't exactly like PayPal.
Yeah.
Generally, eBay had an issue with trying to get payment for stuff. Like two people would have to mail checks to each other.
Yeah, that's gonna work.
If you mail a check and you receive the check, and how do you know the check's real? Then you've got to cash a check and take 2 to 5 days for the money to transfer. So it could take 2 weeks before somebody had confirmed payment, and then they would ship you the item, and so the transaction velocity was very low as a result. If you had instant payment, you could improve transaction velocity dramatically, like a factor of maybe 3 to 5.
Yeah, but I've just sort of seen that when an industry is disrupted, you worry about the major players. I mean, we remember when we started Tesla, we were aspiring to be the GM of the 21st century. 4 years later, GM went bankrupt. You're like, oh, okay, we don't want to be GM. We're good. And it's whoever is going to be the main competitors, we don't know yet, but it may not be the entrenched players. It may
Probably
be
not, yeah.
sort of other companies. And so that happened at Zip2, where we tried our best to partner with the industry because that seemed like the best way to make some money and actually have a revenue model. And we ended up finding the newspapers to be a better partner because they didn't have the Yellow Pages business. And I think they were smarter. Their classifieds business was getting eaten away by Craigslist. Before Craigslist, classifieds was the bread and butter of the newspaper. And of course, anyone who used Craigslist would never use the newspaper. So it was those folks seemed to have a better, at least some of the players had a more vision of the future. And so our business became putting major newspapers, New York Times, to all of the Philadelphia Inquirer, Chicago Tribune, or whatever, all the main players, all the LA Times, everyone. And then we started going internationally, doing the same thing. So if you went on to the New York Times website and you wanted to search for a restaurant, of course, they have all these reviews. Or if you wanted to search for a home, we tied the MLS together with maps and door-to-door directions. So all of these services that we now use and take for granted that use maps and door-to-door directions, we we did that all in the 90s to find a business model.
Yeah.
What made you do PayPal after Zip2? Why didn't you go like straight into sustainable energy?
Right. So, gotta recall things that are now quite a while. So it would have been like 98 when Compaq offered to acquire Zip2, and which I think it was a good thing for them to acquire it, because, as I mentioned, the newspapers actually, or the media companies, had too much control over Zip2. So they were not. We had great technology that was not being deployed effectively, and they would just generally be averse to anything that could remotely be competitive with their newspapers. So we're sort of trapped in this situation, but then Compaq came along and bought the company in late '98, and the deal closed early '99. So then, as a result of that, Kimbal and I had some capital, $20 million or something out of it, and I think the thing that was frustrating to me was that we built incredible technology, and it had not been used. It was just sort of like, it was very disappointing. We put a lot of work into this technology and it just wasn't being used. So I was like, okay, I want to do one more thing on the internet just to show that we can make technology that is, when it's used properly, can be extremely effective. So I thought about what's digital, essentially. What exists in the form of information, and is also not high bandwidth, because in '99 people still mostly had modems, so you couldn't, like, video was not really feasible in '99. So, but money is low bandwidth and digital, effectively, mostly digital. So it's like, what can we do to make money work better? And like, money, in my view, is essentially an information system for labor allocation. So it has no power in and of itself. It's like a database for for guiding people as to what they should do. And so you can think of banks as a set of heterogeneous databases with that are actually not very secure, and certainly the monetary system, the transfer system of checks is very insecure. Still is insecure. So are credit cards, and it's still mostly batch processing, and it was entirely batch processing that day. So it was not. So payments were, or money was this like heterogeneous, high latency, low security collection of databases. That's what banks are. And so, just from an information theory standpoint, this should be something that can be much better if it can be real time, secure, and just very fast. Essentially, it's just one real-time database. So it's like, okay, let's try to build that. So that's what X.com was. And then at the time, I also thought what we should try to do is just do all the financial things as well, not just payments. I still think that's really what PayPal should have done, but whatever, it's water under the bridge at this point. And then there was a company that was formed around the same time called Confinity, which was Peter Thiel and Max Levchin and Luke Nosek, David Sachs, Ken Howery, and a number of others. And at X.com, there's also like Jeremy Stoppelman, and who created Yelp, Roloff Botha, who then went on to run Sequoia and fund YouTube. It was at X.com. So we just had this like two companies with like a crazy amount of talent, X.com and Confinity. And Confinity started as a Palm Pilot cryptography company. Back when you'd communicate via the infrared port of a Palm Pilot.
I remember that. The Palm Pilot.
So it was like, so you could basically communicate crypto tokens between Palm Pilots using the infrared port and then reconcile them on a PC. Now, obviously, they evolved to go in the payments direction as well. And we were both in Palo Alto, like literally a block away from each other. I think at one point we were briefly even in the same building. It was, So we were just competing with each other like maniacs, and then we had a coffee on University Avenue, and said, "Hey, why don't we just combine our efforts, or we're just going to bludgeon each other to death here?" So we merged Confinity and X.com, and raised $100 million in the space of 3 weeks in March of 2000.
Wow.
Yeah, and in April the market went into free fall.
No,
gosh. So
2000.
yeah, and it was like
I remember that.
that was insane.
I know.
And we kind of thought it was going to go into free fall, but we're like, we better get this thing done fast, or we're both going to die. So, X.com was technically the acquirer of Confinity, but it was a 50.1 or 49.9 or something like that, and then there was a lot of drama. There was so much drama at X.com. And the company was called X.com for about a year, and then we changed the company name to the product name. The product was PayPal. But all the incorporation documents and everything is all my incorporation documents.
Who came up with the PayPal name?
I actually don't know.
People call you guys the PayPal Mafia now, Teal wrote that in his book.
I don't know who did the PayPal. I was never a huge fan of PayPal as a name. The reason being that I thought it made sense for the company to kind of
Broader.
Be much broader. Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you limit yourself to payments, then necessarily people want to transfer money out of the system. And as soon as they transfer money out of the system, the efficiency of the database drops dramatically, because now you're in the traditional banking world. So if you just offer all the things that, if you just basically address all the reasons why people are taking money out of the PayPal system, so you have to provide them with checks so that you have a bridge to the legacy transaction system. You got to provide them with a debit card, provide them with the ability to get a loan and that kind of thing. But these are all ancillary to accelerating the velocity and accuracy and security of payments. Then if basically PayPal would be where all the money is. It would just suck all the money out of the banks, and the banks would go away.
Yeah.
So
any plan you're gonna do with the X.com?
I wrote if they just execute the business plan, the product plan I wrote in July 2000. Let's just do that. But I talked to them several times, but they didn't do it.
So why did you and PayPal kind of part ways? What was really the drama that led to that, separation ultimately?
Well, things were very dicey in 2000.
Yeah.
Companies were dying like all over the place. So I was CEO of the combined company, and we're doing quite well from a growth standpoint. We were like adding 100,000 users a month type of thing, which back then was a lot.
Yeah.
But financially things were tough, and we needed to raise a financing round. We were also there were some technical questions around what code architecture would we go with, and then there was also a branding question. Like I said, I think we should not use PayPal as brand, because this is not consistent with being where all the money is. You want a centralized database, so I was kind of against the PayPal branding, and I wanted to do a bunch of things that seemed extremely risky, and I think those things would have worked out, but at a time when companies are dropping like flies, and I'm proposing that we do all these things that sound very risky. This is just much too scary for the rest of the team.
You seem to be attracted to crazy ideas that other people are like, That, like, you know, I think the autopilot one is a great example where everyone's kind of trying this spatial approach to self-driving. You know, they're doing Waymo for 10 years, nobody cares, and you come out and say, hey, we think vision is the way forward, and deep learning and vision, you know, will take us all the way there. How do you find, like, the courage inside to, I mean, people have to be coming up to you all the time, you know, thinking that you're an idiot or it's never going to happen, and, you know, how do you find that in yourself to, like, go through all that resistance and still be confident in, you know, your thesis?
I mean, I try to be hyper rational, so it's not, you know, it's just like if the reasoning fits and you're not violating laws of physics or something, then that's the thing you should do. So, and I guess at the end of the day, if we lost all the money, I wouldn't, you know, as long as we didn't lose other people's money, I guess. I just lose my money, I don't mind. These things just don't seem that crazy to me. So, like, I think if PayPal had executed the plan that I wanted to execute on, I think it would probably be the most valuable company in the world.
Yeah.
It would be called X, but it would be the most valuable company in the world. On the other hand, now that's not all good though. On the other hand, then a lot of super talented people would have stayed, and because PayPal got acquired by eBay not long after, like, you know, there was like the PayPal coup at the end of 2000. 18 months later, it was acquired by eBay. So, and then, you know, if you think of the companies that came out of PayPal, the so-called PayPal mafia, YouTube, you know, there was Steve and Chad created YouTube, Jerry Stubman created Yelp, you know, Peter created Palantir and a bunch of other things. There's David Sachs created this company, and Reid Hoffman created LinkedIn.
It's almost like all that market cap still exists, but now it's allocated on all these other tech companies instead of X.com.
Yeah, so in retrospect, it, like, I don't know, sometimes, like, it's maybe a good thing that X wasn't, or PayPal didn't achieve those things, because all these other companies would have at least been delayed, or may not have existed.
There's definitely been kind of a resurgence in interest as we get into kind of cryptographic, you know, money and Bitcoin and all that, of like interest in this idea, you know. And it's interesting, like, software hasn't eaten the banking industry yet. Software's eaten a lot of industries. There's some that it just hasn't, and banking's still there, you know.
Stripe's eating them slowly, but they're doing a pretty good job. The banks are in trouble if it's not Stripe, it'll be somebody else.
And you love code, but you don't seem to be as bullish on Bitcoin. Do you have any, could you break down, like, why? Because you're talking about this big database that's more secure for faster transactions. It seems like Bitcoin's hitting at least some of those.
I'm neither here nor there on Bitcoin. Yeah. Yeah.
What did you think when you read, like, Satoshi's white paper for the first time? You're like, oh, it's pretty interesting. Or
that was pretty clever. It's just like the things. Yeah. This always gets, like, the crypto people angry, but there are transactions that are not within the bounds of the law, and those. And there are obviously many laws in different countries, and normally cash is used for these transactions. But in order for illegal transactions to occur, the cash must also be used for legal transactions. You need an illegal to legal bridge. That's where crypto comes in.
So is it kind of the dark net stuff?
It can't be entirely dark, because otherwise how do you buy normal stuff?
True. Yeah.
And cash these days is used just much rarer. Mm-hmm. It's hard. It's like increasingly difficult to use cash. some places you can't use cash at all.
True.
So there's a forcing function for transactions that are illegal, quasi-legal, and in some cases legal. But it's got to have some. It's got to be both legal and illegal. It doesn't count otherwise. Otherwise, you simply it can't just be transactions within an illegal economy. Because how do you buy food in a house or something? You must have a legal to illegal bridge. So what I see crypto as is effectively as a replacement for cash, but not as a replacement as a primary. Not as I do not see crypto being the primary database. So now this is sometimes taken being like I'm being judgmental about crypto, and it's actually I think there's a lot of things that are illegal that shouldn't be illegal. But so it's not as though I think that sometimes governments just have too many laws about that. They shouldn't have so many things that are illegal.
Didn't you say like on Mars there'd be less laws?
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Do you still propose a direct democracy on Mars?
I think probably that's the best. I mean, probably it's the best thing.
Mars
Probably.
technocracy.
The Mars technocracy.
And you want to make laws super short and simple, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, like if people can't understand laws, then then what's usually going to happen is some special interest is going to bamboozle the public with long laws.
Yep.
And then the law is, like reading this law is like the size of Lord of the Rings, but a very boring version of it.
Like the dealership thing is just crazy to me. Like America's supposed to be competitive, free market. It's weird, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, just so you want to keep the laws short and give them some kind of sunset period so that they don't just stay there forever. Otherwise, just accumulate over time and just eventually it'll be unwieldy. So the laws should have some time frame associated with them. They automatically go away. I mean, it's just keep the laws short to avoid trickery and sort of special interests that ultimately does not benefit the public. And then I think direct democracy is less susceptible to corruption than a representative democracy. So, corruption just being like, to what degree is this action being taken that do not serve the interests of the population? Do not result in a net increase in population happiness as a whole. So that's why I think probably direct is better. And then just have things in real time. So if you want to vote on something, you can vote on it real fast. Probably I would say make it easier to get rid of laws than to put them in, because these things tend to have a lot of inertia, and so have a bias towards having laws go away and not be there. So like maybe it takes 60% to put a law in place, but 40% to remove it, or something like that. Yeah. I mean, let's try it. See what happens.
The bills are extremely long that they pass. No one reads them.
Hardly anyone in Congress has read the bill, and even if they've read the bill, if you quiz them on the details, they wouldn't know it.
They'll find their page.
Yeah, there's like, tell me what's, this, they have no idea.
Seems kind of alarming that that's like the status quo and everyone just accepts it. But
yeah, these laws tend to be written by industry groups as well. So they'll write the law and then interact with the congressional staff but most of the work will be done by the industry groups, and so they're going to write laws that entrench their position.
It's like the people or the players buying the ref, like you were saying earlier. Exactly. It's that exact thing.
Right, so you get the regulatory capture of yeah. The players shouldn't be paying the ref salary type of thing. Well, the ref shouldn't be thinking, I'm going to retire and get paid by the players. So it's kind of amazing that it works as well as it does, given all these issues. Yeah, so then PayPal, I ended up getting malaria and anyway in 2001. No, 2001.
Yeah, tell us about this. The malaria thing.
That was you went on vacation, right?
Yeah, we went to South Africa with Kimbal actually.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And then came back and had like a near-death case of malaria.
Yeah, grew up in South Africa. We'd go to the bushveld all the time, to the what you guys call safari, and you just had a house in the bush. You just go there every few weeks or so. I don't think we ever took malaria tablets.
We didn't have malaria in those days. I think there was a drought and then a flood and then suddenly the mosquitoes.
Yeah, right. And so we were told to, and we did take malaria tablets. You took them as well, and when he got back, he was in Stanford and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. Our uncle, who's a doctor in South Africa, is like, he has malaria. And it's like, no, he doesn't have malaria. We checked. So, check again. Malaria kind of hides in the body. And then
that's why they wouldn't believe it.
Wow.
So this was after PayPal got started?
Oh, this is 2001. So it was sort of after the PayPal coup. So I was on the PayPal board and I was providing sort of product advice and whatnot, but in December, late December 2000, went on a trip to South Africa, came back early January 2001, and I had a severe case of malaria, almost died.
I sat next to his bed for about 5 days. It was yellow and just tubes going in and out of him. Just sat early morning till late at night, just waiting to see. And then they said to me, get some pajamas for him, and the closest store was some like Dress for Less or something, so I just got him some pajamas, and then the next thing, after 5 days, he woke up and he says, so there's bunnies on my pajamas. I knew he was better. I think they were bunnies or ducks or something, because that was what I could get, and then I knew he was better.
You were sleeping. I mean, like it affected your brain that harshly.
Yeah, no, it was bad. It's really bad.
So that change your perspective? How did it influence you after that?
I don't know. I don't think it changed me that much. Would you say?
I don't think it changed you.
No, I don't think it did.
Recovered and went back to
Yeah.
But how many times have you been on
I
vacation
lost like
since
50
then?
pounds, so it was great.
Oh, so no more vacations though.
Haha. Well, yeah, it took me like almost 6 months to get back to normal. And then in 2001, I was thinking about what to do next, and I thought there's like, okay, sustainable energy, like basically electric cars, solar, space, and then a friend of mine asked me, so what are you gonna do next? And I said, well, so I would love to do something in space, but I don't think there's anything that a private individual could do in space. But at least I'm going to go on the NASA website and find out when people are going to Mars. And I go on the NASA website and it's nowhere to be found. And so I was like, well, this is pretty weird. And then I discovered that it was actually a NASA policy not to talk about it.
Really?
Yeah, at the time.
Huh. Why was that, do you think?
What I was told is that when George Bush the First when he was elected, he said he asked NASA to put together a plan to send people to Mars in 90 days. They came back with a plan, and it was $500 billion.
Oh.
And it says, well, this is like political suicide. So then after that, talk of manned missions to Mars were banned.
Wow.
That's what I sold. Yeah. So anyway, so it's like, well, maybe there's something that can be done here to get the public excited about going to Mars. And if I get the public excited, then they will vote NASA to have more funding. And so the original idea for SpaceX was just to have a philanthropic mission to Mars. was
Yeah,
cool.
actually, just I started a graphic of a pot plant.
Not a
Just
pot
need to
plant,
get the
but
pot plant to Mars. You know, it was like an inspiration.
Sure.
Just as a way to prove to the world that it could be done.
Yeah. So the mission was called Mars Oasis. It was seeds and dehydrated nutrient gel that would hydrate upon landing. You get this great picture of green plants on a red background. Be like the first sort of life as we know it on Mars, and you can also learn a lot about what does it take to keep plants alive and have a little miniature greenhouse on surface of Mars. So that's what I initially pursued as like a way to basically increase NASA's budget. It wasn't let's create a space company. It was how do we get NASA's budget increased so we can go send people to Mars. And I was trying to figure out how to get this thing launched, and the rockets, the European and US rockets, were too expensive, and I couldn't afford them. So I went to Russia to try to buy some ICBMs in 2001, literally, and they kept raising the price on me, and it was being quite difficult. And I said, I could afford to pay like $9 million for an ICBM, but not 20, because I figured we need to do 2 of these missions because odds are good that one would fail, and then it could have a negative impact potentially. So that was pretty weird being in Moscow trying to buy ICBMs in 2001.
That's amazing.
How do you negotiate to buy an ICBM?
Yeah, I call up the military and say, well, they got to get they got to get rid of these things anyway because of the arms reduction treaties. So it's like, if you're going to throw it away, I'll take it off your hands. They have to. It was like SS-18 Dnepr. It was the biggest nuclear missile in the Russian fleet, and but anyway, they're gonna decommission these things. So why not just sell me them instead? And then every time I talk to them, the price would go up, and I'm like, this is not good. Because so even if once we do a deal, I'm probably going to get shafted afterwards too. And if this is the pre-deal shafting, it's like what's going to be afterwards. After I've given the money, then it's not going to be good. So, and then I started looking into it as like why do rockets cost so much, and so there's nothing fundamental about why they should cost so much. If you add up the materials and say it's not like the raw materials cost that much. You really just need to figure out a smart way to get the materials in that shape. And then we need to make rockets reusable. So like any form of transport, if it's not reusable, it's extremely expensive. If cars were single use, and you needed a round trip, if you bought a car for $20,000, then your round trip would cost you $40,000.
That's true.
No, it's crazy. So it's the same thing's true for aircraft and boats and rockets and everything. So the rockets were expensive even as expendable things, but then they were also not reusable. So there's no way we're going to have a city on Mars unless we can have reusable, low-cost, reliable rockets. That's fundamentally the issue. So I came to the conclusion that even if this Mars Oasis mission was successful, it would still not result in it would not materially further the goal of being a multi-planet species because the rocket technology was not good enough, and it was not getting better. In fact, it was arguably getting worse. So the real thing that needed to be solved here is reusable rocketry and lowering the cost of access to space. And that's like, okay, well, I'm going to try to do that. So then I got SpaceX started in early 2002, basically. I was living in Palo Alto at the time, but most of the engineering expertise was in Southern California. So that's why I moved to LA.
Did you ever have any like even inkling of imagination that you could be doing, a dozen launches a year and being contracted with NASA? Is that even like it?
I thought that was I thought we had 10% chance of success or something like that.
You ended up being chief engineer, right?
Yeah.
Because like no one wanted to give up their secure jobs with UI and something at the
Yeah.
beginning.
Exactly. I actually tried to hire. Basically, there'd been a number of attempts at doing a sort of a private rocket company or commercial rocket company, and they're all failed effectively, and that's to the degree that it was like a joke in the aerospace industry. Like, how do you make a large fortune in the rocket? Start with a how do you make a small fortune in the rocket industry? Start with a large one. Pretty soon
I'm
it's
working on
gonna
that
be
in the
small.
restaurant business.
Yeah, they told me that joke so many times. I would just jump to the punchline, it was very hard to recruit people because I had not built any physical hardware before. And I kept being called internet guy for the longest time, for ages. Finally, for the first 10 years, they calling me internet guy, or basically an internet entrepreneur / fool. He's trying to start a rocket company. What an idiot. That was generally how it went. So it was quite hard to recruit people. And especially if somebody's got like a secure job at Boeing or Lockheed or something like that, then trying to recruit them to be chief engineer of a solid rocket company was hopeless. So basically, nobody who was good was willing to join, and there was no point in hiring somebody who wasn't good. So I ended up being chief engineer, which is so. The first 3 launches failed, and probably if I'd been better, then we would have gotten to orbit sooner. So it took me a while to learn all these things. So
From books or?
Books and talking to people.
Did you go to Utah and talk to anybody, like at ATK Orbital? Or
Oh yeah, I visited ATK.
yeah.
Orbital is
my father
Dallas,
there.
Virginia.
Yeah.
So yeah, I visited ATK, visited Orbital, and Orbital had a success with the solid rocket based Pegasus, but they'd also gotten like an 8 launch deal from DARPA. So okay, if you're starting off with basically an 8 launch deal from DARPA, that's a good situation. We did not have a launch deal from anyone. And Pegasus is there's some clever engineering with Pegasus, but fundamentally, I think launching rockets from planes is not sensible. It sounds like it would be a good idea, but it's not. And then even Orbital went away from doing that with as soon as you get past a certain size, they went to ground launch.
Yeah, I was reading somewhere that ATK, Morton Thiokol, they were doing snowcats, they were doing ski lifts, and they sold that to the man who made the DeLorean.
Really?
Yeah. I just read that in their Wikipedia. I'm like, oh, that's fascinating. When I come around.
So, yeah. Right, so we got SpaceX going. And that was very difficult. We got the Falcon 1 rocket built. It was very simple. It's the simplest orbital rocket that's liquid fueled, so that it had the potential for reusability, for useful reusability. And then we had 3 failures. Finally got to orbit at the end of 2008. So
That was incredible. Going down to Kwajalein and watching.
yeah, you wrote it
rockets.
like a blog for a while. I think.
Yeah, I actually still have it up there. It's still, and it's an old blogging platform that Google still keeps alive. It's called Kwaj Rockets blogspot.com.
I think it's
I
going to get a
remember
lot of
correctly.
traffic soon.
Yeah, totally. Send it. Check it out. It's all there. It's
Yeah.
photos and photos of.
Yeah.
There was one
Yeah, we'll
photo
check it
of
out.
Elon picking up a satellite. We launched the rocket and the rocket exploded, which was very, very, very sad. Everyone's super sad. People were like pouring their heart and soul into the rocket, and the satellite was, I think, a U.S. Navy or
Air Force Academy.
Air Force Academy, and it was thrown out of the rocket and fell through the roof of the hangar on the launch pad.
This is like where you really think.
It's barely a hangar, exactly. It's like a stand-up
A
tent.
small tool shed.
Yeah.
Wasn't supposed to do that.
Maybe the size of this room. The rocket it had. This is the first launch failure, so it had there's a cracked aluminum B-nut on that cracked during liftoff and created so there was an engine fire. This wouldn't have been the end of the world, but there was one of the helium lines was steel mesh overwrapped with a Kevlar sleeve, and it melted the sleeve. And so we lost pressure, pneumatic pressure, which caused the engine valves to close. So about 30 seconds after liftoff, the engine shut itself off due to the engine fire, and then it went ballistic and basically smashed in the rocks just I don't know, a couple hundred feet offshore, and when it was quite a big explosion actually. In that explosion, the satellite, which was in a fairing, went through the fairing on a ballistic arc back onto the island, smashed through the tool shed roof and onto the floor in a pretty reasonable condition. Like it wasn't totally gnarled.
Were you able to, you could reuse it?
So we gave them back their satellite. So like, we didn't lose your satellite, but may need some repair. But it was so improbable that the satellite would come back. We had a couple more failures after that. 2008 was a particularly difficult year because we had the third failure in 2008. The Tesla financing round collapsed.
Oh, it was such a nightmare.
And I got divorced, and it was just
I think 2008 was
bad year.
really, really bad. It was a bad year.
Yeah, I don't think anyone could. I think 2018.
I think 2018 was worse.
Yeah,
What's up with AIDS?
Well, with the Model 3 ramp, right? I mean,
Oh, there were so many things that happened in 2018.
So much drama, it's insane.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Sorry, so we're in 2002 starting SpaceX. Moved down to LA. And it was pretty fun in the beginning. Like generally, startups are pretty fun in the beginning, and then you go through the, chasm of doom.
Yeah, that's right. Chasm of doom.
The trough of sorrow.
It's trough of sorrow, exactly.
Yeah.
It's rough.
Despair.
Yeah, it's usually always like everyone's like super optimistic and excited for first year or so, and then things start to go awry, and there's usually many years of grief before this finally day dawns. So it's like 2002, and then about in 2003 is when Rosen and JB Straubel called me up and said, "Hey, we want to have lunch." I want to say Harold Rosen. I think that's his name. But he weirdly had he was a pioneer in space technology and electric vehicles, which is odd crossover. And he'd done something called Rosen Motors, which is like sort of an electric vehicle company, and but he'd also been pioneer in geostationary satellites. So he called me up and said, "Hey, let's have lunch." So we had like lunch at like Smith and Wollensky or something in El Segundo, where SpaceX started, and so Straubel and Rosen were talking about space stuff, and then started talking about electric cars, and I said, "Oh yeah, so I was going to be working on electric car technology at Stanford," and then JV said, we should take a drive in the T0 from AC Propulsion. And I was like, yeah, because the timing was like lithium-ion batteries was really like the critical breakthrough needed for compelling electric cars. And so I was like, okay, I'll go try out their T0, which had specs similar to what we eventually brought to market as the Tesla Roadster. So then so I got a ride in the T0, and then I tried to convince Al Cacconi and Tom Gage to commercialize the T0. Now the T0, and there's like lots of stuff online about it. It didn't have doors or a roof, so like clearly you need to add those things, or any safety systems, and it was very unreliable because it was just like sort of a proof of concept basically.
I heard it was basically like hand assembled. You guys really had trouble scaling it.
No, it literally didn't have doors or a roof, or any airbags, or an effective cooling system for the battery, and it was not safe, and it was very unreliable. Break down. It needed to be babied by an engineer, or it would not. You couldn't use it. So, but nonetheless, it did get like 0 to 60. I think under 4 seconds, 250-mile range.
It was enough to convince you that it was possible.
I knew it was possible because if you go from the energy density of lead acid to lithium ion, you've got about a 4x energy density improvement. So if you've got say a 60-mile range with lead acid, you're going to have about a 250-mile range with lithium ion with the same weight. But it was cool to see it in action with AC propulsion, and I tried hard to convince those guys. Like I really pestered them a lot to go into to commercialize the T0, and they just did not want to do it. Weirdly, the thing they wanted to make was an electric Scion, and I'm like, you guys, nobody's gonna pay $70,000 for an electric Scion, okay? That was their idea, $70,000 for an electric Scion. I'm like, this is not gonna work, okay? You will sell like 14 of these things, and I'm like, I kid you not, I have like the email trails and these. Yeah, I think they're still around. So, in fact, but I even say, listen, even though I think this is the dumbest idea ever, I will fund 1/10 of it. If you can find 9 other people, and then I think the only other person they could find who would do it was Sergey Brin. So it's like, okay, Sergey and I are the only ones willing to do this, I think, and so they didn't actually get it off the ground. And I said it's gonna fail, but at least it's something. And so then eventually I said, I'm like, listen, if you guys are not going to commercialize the T0, do you mind if I do it? And they're like, no, yeah, that'll be totally fine. I'm like, okay. So then it's like, okay, so I'm go do this with JV, and we'll go create a commercial version of the T0, and then Gage and Cacconi said, well, there's some other people who also want to do it. Do you want to maybe team up with them? He said there were 2 other groups that wanted to do it, and I was like, okay, sure. Maybe this is a way that I can have my cake and eat it too. famous last words.
Never works out.
God damn! Try to have your cake and eat it too, doesn't it? Right.
This one's gonna be easy.
No, I mean, I didn't think it would be easy, but it was like, I thought maybe I can allocate like 20 to 30 hours a week and just work on product engineering, and then other people can do the other stuff. And I don't even like doing the other stuff anyway. So that didn't work out. So then Tom Gage said, he said there were two teams, but I only ever met one, and that was Eberhard, Topping, and Wright. But like the thing that is really bugs me about them is like they Eberhard in particular, the worst guy I've ever worked with, and I want to make a note of this. He is literally the worst person I've ever worked with, and I've worked with some real douchebags. Okay, to be number one takes a lot. It's not easy. His version of the story is that out of the blue he pitched me on funding his electric car company, and he convinced me to do it. Totally false. Okay, I was like, I'm creating an electric car company. It's like, the Gage said, well, maybe you could team up. And it's like, okay, well, maybe that might be worth doing, and so the company ended up being basically 5 people. This is Wright, Topping, Eberhard, Straubel, and myself, and so it was the 5 of us. And like Topping always tries to write right out of the history books, because they had a huge battle and they made me choose which one was going to be CEO. It's Wright or Eberhard, and I talked to JB and I was like, which one? Because I really did not want to be CEO. So then they're like, okay, well, both have issues, but maybe Wright has bigger issues than Topping. That's what JB said. So maybe, lesser of evils. I was like, okay, fine. I got to make a choice here, because the 2 of them they refused to be in the same building. So it was like, a lot of drama. Tesla has so much drama. And I was like, okay, it's not like, I said like, lesser of 2 evils. So it's like I said, Ian Wright, sorry, not that I didn't think he had good points, but if I gotta pick one, I was trying not to be CEO. I gotta make this rocket company work. So anyway, so then made it was like Wright, it's like had to leave then. Anyway, so we got basically we jammed AC propulsion, powertrain, and battery pack into a Lotus Elise. With the first prototyping, like really just jammed it in, in retrospect, this was not a good idea, because the car ended up weighing like 60% more than an Elise, or on that order, and we didn't have enough volume to put the battery pack, and we had to we invalidated all of the crash tests because the weight distribution was different. It was heavier, so none of the crash tests were valid anymore. We had to redo the airbags. The air conditioner ran off a belt fan, so we didn't have a belt fan, so we had to have a new air conditioning system. So we had to change the HVAC system, and so basically in the end, only about like I think 6 or 7% of the parts ended up being in common with an Elise. Wow. So, and we went through a lot of trouble trying to shoehorn everything in there. And it's a cute car, but it's 10% too small. It's like, and then the costs ended up being crazy. And then there was an audit of the costs of the production cost of the Roadster by one of the investors that joined in 2007, and then they called me up and said, hey, the numbers that Martin is telling you, that everyone's telling you about the Roadster are totally false.
Oh boy.
And I was like, what do you mean? Like, he says, no, we just did an audit. It's more than twice of what he's saying.
Yikes.
Yeah. It's like we would have to sell this car for $250,000 in order to not lose money. I was like, this is insane. So anyway, then we obviously had to fire Everhard. There was no choice about that. Yeah, and then it turned out not only had he misled me directly, but he'd instructed others to also lie.
Oh.
Yes. When I say like somebody is like the worst person I've ever worked with, it's pretty bad. Yeah. So, but SpaceX also hadn't gotten to orbit at that time, so I was like, man. So then I asked, what is the name? Harris. Remember the guy? I'm blanking on the
guy
name.
we brought on as CEO.
The interim.
Yeah, he ran like a manufacturing company. I mean, he seemed pretty smart. The problem that I found with Tesla was we were a startup in Silicon Valley, building a car that was really manufacturing and materials engineering. And it's really like all the talent was for, you think there was probably talent, in Detroit or Japan. But if you took any of those guys in to run Tesla, they would run it like a car company, and then it would be destroyed.
Well, they had no idea. You can take somebody who's running.
You just could not take someone from a massive company culture and have them do a startup, and yet you couldn't find anyone in Silicon Valley who knew enough about making cars, and so we kind of found a middle of the road one he was an expert in manufacturing. Flextronics, that's right.
Ex-CEO of Flextronics was an investor. And he agreed to just join as interim CEO, and this is 2007.
Yeah. But I mean, Tesla was a company you tried so hard not to be CEO of.
Yes. But the thing is, this is misinterpreted. If I say that it's misinterpreted as like I somehow don't love Tesla, which I do, it's just like trying not to go insane. With work.
Yeah, being CEO of a real startup is 80 hours a week. Being CEO of two is 160 hours a week, and there's only 169 hours or something of sleep.
168 hours a week.
168 hours a week. So, like, you just can't physically do it.
Yeah, I mean, the pain level is extreme. So, that's Anyway, I tried quite hard not to be CEO, but had to be. No choice. That or Tesla would die. So that Everhard was fired in July 2007, and he was at the time we didn't know he'd instructed other people to lie, so we thought he was just, it wasn't as bad. But once he left the building, then it turned out no, he'd actually orchestrated a massive deception, which is quite bad. So, he also said he came up with the name of Tesla Motors, which is false. That was created by a guy in '95, and moreover, he knows this because we went to great length. We had to buy the trademark.
Yeah, exactly.
So he didn't come up with the name. It was trademarked in '95. So it was like there's a whole bullshit backstory of it, but. The guy, we almost had to change the name of the company because the guy who owned Tesla Motors wouldn't communicate with us, and so eventually we sent the nicest kind of company, who's weirdly Martin's best friend, which I don't understand, but Mark Toppening, super nice guy.
I like Mark a lot, actually.
Yeah, you can't not like Mark.
Yeah, exactly.
It's impossible. He's a super nice guy, so. We sent Mark to go sit on the guy's doorstep and not leave until he...
That's right.
until he agreed to at least negotiate with us or something. He talked to us. And then we ended up buying the trademark for $75,000.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Was he the one who owned the domain too?
No, that was a whole different nightmare. But No, the domain guy, that took us 10 years to buy that Tesla.com domain. Man, and he is, I think, still like a networking engineer at Juniper. So, yeah, that cost us like $10 million.
Yeah, that was
Crazy.
like the guy just held out.
Was he just sitting on the domain, or was he using it for something?
It was impossible to. No, he wasn't using it for anything.
Just
Just holding the name.
It's like Twitter handle Falcon Heavy isn't being used. We're fighting for that one.
Yeah, so man, took us ages to buy the Tesla.com domain. But we were gonna have to change the name to be something else. And actually, the lead candidate was Faraday as the name, because Faraday invented the electric motor, and then Tesla perfected the electric motor with the AC induction motor. So if we couldn't do Tesla, we would do Faraday. And then ironically, a competitor was later created called Faraday.
Yeah. A startup
Yeah.
from China, right?
Yeah. So
Did you guys have a Faraday logo or anything? Were you that far down?
no, we didn't really even have a Tesla logo until later, because there's nothing to sell or anything. So but in the end, the Tesla logo and the Tesla font was done by me working with basically a little firm. That's why the Tesla and SpaceX, there's some similarities between the fonts, and that's because it was done by the same people. Yeah, I spent a lot of time on the Tesla and SpaceX fonts. Get the little things.
That's cool.